Hopefully everyone knows how to sing Hau'oli Lahanau Ya Oi, Makulal Hawaiʻi. This is a special, so it's actually Kate Rayworth's birthday today. Yeah, I'm like, Kate, you're gonna do your birthday. She says, oh, it'd be an honor for me to just do this with you guys. It's like my birthday present. So she's on the other side of the world. She just finished dinner with her family who are constantly telling her you gotta work less hard, and she's gonna jump in with us. So I wanted to start out our conversation honoring her birthday. So if you guys, Kate, aloha, if you can, we're gonna sing to you real quick before we get started here. Hau'oli lahanau ya oi, hau'oli lahanau ya oi, hau'oli lahanau ya oi, hau'oli lahanau ya oi. Dear esteemed friends and colleagues, it's my incredible privilege and honor to introduce Kate Rayworth. Kate Rayworth is an ecological economist focused on making economics fit for 21st century realities. She is the creator of The Donut of Social and Planetary Boundaries. Her international best-selling book, Donut Economics: 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, has been translated into more than 20 languages. Kate is a senior associate at Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute, where she teaches on Masters in Environmental Change and Management. Over the last 25 years, Kate's career has taken her from working with micro-entrepreneurs in villages of Zanzibar to co-authoring the Human Development Report for the UNDP in New York, followed by a decade as senior researcher at Oxfam. And it's just an incredible privilege again to introduce Kate. And thank you again for honoring your time with us. We started our day out, Kate, in really framing the ancestral circular economy. We heard from incredible community innovators, scholars, practitioners, really highlighting this idea that, circularity in many ways isn't something new for indigenous communities. The challenge is how do we interface, how do we engage, how do we change the structure and system of today to operate more like that of our ancestors, given the vast tools and techniques we have. So I'm going to hand it off to you, and mahalo again for being here on your birthday, Kate.
Aloha, and thank you so much, Kamana, and to everybody. I'm thrilled to hear you singing for me. I'm really, really touched by that. Thank you. This is indeed a birthday present to myself. When you invited me to contribute about 6 months ago, I said, yep, I would absolutely love to do this on the evening of my birthday. So here we are. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm super aware that I am a British woman sitting here in Oxford in the UK, of all places, contributing to your conference on circular economy in Hawaii. And if we did that wrong, it could almost be symbolic of everything that you are ensuring doesn't happen, because you already have your conversation going about the ancestral circular economy in Hawaii. And here comes this British woman from across the world, right? I haven't been in the conference. I've been out to sup with my family. I haven't been able to hear everything you've already been saying. And it would be such an old way of doing things if I suddenly showed up and said, oh, here's how to do circular economy. So I'm just really noticing the old patterns that we could fall into if we didn't take care. But we're not going to fall into those old patterns. I think I'm here in Kamana. We have connected because of the work that is happening in Hawaii of the ancestral circular economy, and how powerful and beautiful that is to share with yourselves, to relearn, remember, and enrich it, and to share it back out to the world and say, this is something we have known and still know and will re-know, and others can learn from yourselves. So I'm really honored to join you. Very aware I haven't been able to hear the conversations that have been happening. I would have loved to, but my family would not have forgiven me. So let me share from the other side of the world some inspirations that I hope might be of interest, of value, of how we connect the reconnections that we're all seeking to transform our economies. So I want to start with the very 20th century economics that I was taught when I was a student. Hang on. I went to university in the same city that I live in now, in Oxford University. I studied economics. Economics comes from the ancient Greek. It means the art of household management. Imagine that. Imagine if we actually mastered the art of managing, of stewarding our household in the interest of all her inhabitants. It would be a fine art. But what's taught in the name of economics, I don't believe does that at all. The goal of the mainstream Western mindset that I have been taught, that millions of students around the world are still taught, is endless growth. This ever-rising curve, right? This shape of progress is very clear in the Western 20th century economic mindset. It's forwards and up, endlessly. More is better. And I think it's a profound problem at a deep level within ourselves to think that more is better, but also the way that we have judged the success of our nations by this metric has driven so much environmental destruction, but also social fragmentation. So we need a different vision. And I'm very aware of myself sitting in the Western mindset, emerging from this, trying to find our way back towards a much more holistic vision. So as a counter to this very 20th century growth-led vision, I drew this picture, which, for reasons you can see, has ended up being called the donut. Think of it this way. It's the only donut that actually turns out to be good for us, because you don't have to eat it. It's conceptual. It's a way of thinking and seeing differently with our eyes. So if you think of humanity's use and connection with Earth's cycles and resources radiating out from the center of that concentric circle, it means that the hole in the middle of the donut, that's a place where people are left falling short on the essentials of life, where people do not have the resources they need for food and water and energy and housing, health and education, for equity, for voice, for peace, for income. I crowdsource these from the world's governments. They come from the Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason for crowdsourcing them there is it means that all the governments of the world have already agreed that every person in the world has a right to live free of the center of that, live over the social foundation. So leave nobody in the hole. But, and this is a very big 21st century but, as we seek to meet our needs and our wants, and oh, there have turned out to be so many wants, as we seek to meet our needs and wants, we put pressure on the very systems and sources on which we depend. We put pressure on the climate stability, on oceans, on the soil's fertility, on the web of life. And we start to risk going over this ecological ceiling, which is made up of the 9 planetary boundaries first recognized by Earth system scientists in 2009. They said, we believe these are the critical 9 life-supporting systems that make life work on planet Earth, that keep us with a stable climate, with fertile soils, healthy oceans, abundant biodiversity, recharging fresh water, a protective ozone layer overhead. These are what make life work. We'd be crazy to kick ourselves out. So in the simplest of words, the goal of the donut is to leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot Earth's limits. We need to create a minimal, safe and just space for humanity in which we can thrive. So that's the goal of the donut. And when I first drew it, I was amazed by the reaction to it in 2012. The number of people who said, this is how I've always thought of sustainable development. I've never seen the picture before. It started to change the conversation, particularly in Western communities, amongst Western activists, pushing back against the economics they'd been taught. And I was really struck by the power of pictures, that an image can change the way we think. And so I started to look at symbols used by indigenous cultures for millennia, symbols of wealth, of health, well-being, of health, of thriving. And I was so struck that time and time again in cultures across the world, across time, this shape of a dynamic circle has emerged as a symbol of well-being, of balance and wholeness from the takarangi to the yin yang to the Indian dharma to the medicine wheel, the Zen koan, the koru, the Celtic double spiral, the Buddhist endless knot, and many more, no doubt. So I realized that what this donut was doing from a Western point of view is beginning in a rather clunky Western reductionist way compared to these beautiful holistic visions, is trying to escape from the framing of success being endless growth to move back towards a wisdom that is held in so many different indigenous cultures for millennia. Can the Western mindset recover? So now I think of the donut as a bridge for the Western mindset to move towards this wisdom. And so this is partly why it's an honor and a privilege for me to connect with you as part of my own mindset recovery program, to learn from cultures that are holding on to and celebrating and bringing back that ancestral wisdom that has always been there. If the goal of the donut is not endless growth, but thriving in balance, a bit like a heartbeat between the social foundation and that ecological ceiling, we are very far from that balance right now. This is a diagram made up of metrics of the whole world, where you can see all of the red shows us that billions of people are falling short on life's essentials. On food, for example, that red wedge goes 11% of the way to the center of the circle, because 11% of people worldwide don't have enough food to eat every day. But you can see there's shortfall on every one of those social indicators. Some are measured just with one indicator, some are measured with two indicators. That's why you get the stepped effect. So billions of people worldwide still falling short on the most essential needs of life. And at the same time, we are overshooting at least 6 of these planetary boundaries. So this is a double whammy challenge to turn around. And I think of this as humanity's collective selfie. This is the state of humanity and the rest of the living world now, in these early days, this first quarter of the 21st century. And it's a reminder to anyone, again, raised with the mindset, the Western education and economics that I've been raised with, that last century's economic theories and government policies and business models and community lifestyles, none of those were designed to solve this. In fact, many of them have contributed to this. We need new theories, or maybe we need old ones, rediscover them. We need new government policies and new designs of business. And we need new aspirations if we are to be the generation that actually starts to turn this story around. And this story is brought to us every day in the headlines of newspapers. The headlines that we must never become immune to their impacts because it's another hurricane, another storm, another drought somewhere else. These are all impacting on lives, in people, and on the living world. How do we start to turn this story around? And the statistic that shocks me the most and I find hardest to get my head around is one of the ones in the middle. The richest 1% of people own half of the world's wealth. So this is a deeply ecologically degraded world, all of that overshoot, but it's also extraordinarily unequal world. And this is the context we inherit. What I'm showing you here is a global picture. And of course, most policy happens much closer to home. So colleagues of mine have downscaled this donut to a series of national donuts. And you can see here 4 very different countries. Malawi, on around $1,500 per person per year. Massive human shortfall, all the red in the center, but without overshooting any of their share of planetary boundaries. China, a double whammy challenge of human shortfall and ecological overshoot. France, on over $50,000 per person per year. Still few social shortfalls, but significant ecological overshoot. And then the US, high inequality within the country, that you can see that red wedge on the inside, and massive ecological overshoot across the nation. And let me be clear that all of the red overshoot is not just the carbon emissions and material footprint and the fertilizer use in the nation. It's based on the consumption of resources worldwide. So it's a consumption-based calculation, taking account of all the clothing and food and electronics and building materials that are imported into a nation for use by its residents. So we can immediately see that every nation here needs to transform. There is one country that's closer than others in the world to getting into the donut, and that is Costa Rica, right? They're not there, but they're closer than any other that we have measured in terms of somewhat closer to meeting people's needs, nearly within the means of the living planet. What if every nation actually aimed to do that and notice that they do it on 1/3 of the income of the United States and less than half of France? So then let's look at over 50 countries, similar idea, these national donuts. And the place where every nation should want to be is that top left-hand corner, that little green donut there. That's where we rise up to meet the needs of all people, no one falling short, but we do so coming back within the means of the living planet. So the first thing we notice, again, no one's there. Costa Rica is closer than others. For me, this diagram tells us that anytime we catch ourselves talking about developed countries or advanced nations, we should say, where do you mean? Because there's not a single country here that should be calling itself developed or advanced. There's nothing developed about overshooting planetary boundaries in ways that break down the life support systems of the whole planet and particularly undermine the life chances of people in low-income countries who we know are hit first and hardest by the impacts of breakdowns of climate and ecological stability. Now, on here, you can see the United States and Canada and Australia really out on the extreme on their own. What if we could create a donut for Hawaii itself? I invite you to ask yourselves, if Hawaii were here as a nation, where would it be? Somebody could do it, by the way. It could become a university student's research project. You could definitely do it. Where do you think your nation would be? How close? How much transformation is needed on that ecological ceiling? How much transformation on the social foundation? Let's remember that all of these nations, though they stand as separate dots on the page, they are, of course, profoundly interconnected by histories of colonialism, military and corporate power, trade and finance rules, resource extraction, and the current and future impacts of climate change. Predominantly trends from the global north impacting upon the global south, but with great complexity within, including in your own story. So we need transformation within nations and between. Now, the history of economic growth has generally taken countries in this direction. When a nation like Malawi, you can see at the bottom of the arrow there, when you double your income from $1,500 to $3,000, from $3,000 to $6,000 to $6,000 to $12,000, those doublings, massive improvement in well-being in people's lives, in the health of children, their education, the security of families, health and nutrition, housing quality, opportunity. But instead of moving into the donut, countries have historically, as we can see, tended to move just straight past it and gone into ecological overshoot, converting additional income into overshoot of the planetary boundaries. So if that's the history of growth, can we change the future of planetary prosperity? And I like to reimagine and recluster these countries. Can these low-income nations, this is Uganda, Tanzania, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kenya, can these nations rise? What would it take for them to meet the needs of all people without overshooting planetary boundaries in the way that every nation before them has done? What would that mean? Can the middle-income nations, Mexico, Turkey, Russia, Iran, China, and others, can they reorient? Instead of going past it, move towards into it. Can the high-income nations, like mine, like the United States, like the whole of Europe, reduce our ecological overshoot, our dramatic ecological overshoot, while finally meeting the needs of all people, because these nations certainly have the resources to do it? And we need a rebalancing between. What would that rebalancing mean in terms of reparations, in terms of redistribution of wealth, of access to technology, in rebalancing voice in international institutions, cancelling unjust debt, and many other redesigns that are needed to rebalance between these nations, while the world's richest 1% own over half the world's wealth. So what would it take to start moving in this direction? I believe there are two major dynamics we need to change. And the first is at the heart of what is known as the circular economy. So we know in many places where there has been colonialism, where there has been industrialization, we have inherited linear, degenerative industrial systems of the take Earth's resources, make them into stuff we want, use it for a while and throw it away. And that is running down the life support systems of our planetary home and running down our local ecologies. The challenge is to convert these linear, degenerative arrows into circular, cyclical, regenerative ones so that resources are not used up, they're used again and again. Earth is able to regenerate herself. And of course, this is where the work and the history of your nation, your Hawaii's ancestral circular economy is so rich. People talk about new economics, and we could say this already was known. This once we knew before. Add a K. I learned this from people working at the Atlantic Institute. I love it. New economics is actually with a K now. We once knew this already. We're just learning it again. So a regenerative world. And this, of course, is imagined in so many different ways. On landscape, Earth is still forgiving us. She's still generous to us when we invite and enable restoration. She still comes back and breathes in again in so many localities. And in terms of industries, no longer throwing our waste in the neighborhoods of the world's poorest people, but upstream, changing the design of products and changing the design of companies so that they can be repaired and refurbished and shared and reused, so we don't have this throwaway culture in the first place. Bringing it down to the level of a city, I love these photographs from South Korea, from Seoul, a 10-lane highway replaced by the river that once ran through it, and now it's brought back. And the parks and the people, and this looks a little bit like it's a Photoshop picture. It's not, it's real. Imagine living in this district of the city and the transformation in your life and health and your lungs and the nature it brings back. And then compare these two buildings, these two hospitals. One hospital in the UK, where I live, literally there's almost no living thing. I think you can see a couple of people standing in front of the front door, but no life. Compare that to this nature-rich hospital in Singapore and ask yourself, where would you rather get better? And we know our deep connection to seeing nature improves our own health. So can we bring regenerative design from the landscape into the industry, into the design of cities, into the design of buildings? Yes. And what a time to be a designer, an architect, a regenerator. What a time to be an economic reimaginer, to bring back and reinvent for this. So from degenerative to regenerative, but also I believe it's crucial to highlight, and I highlight it separately, even though it's embedded within the circular concept, that we have inherited deeply divisive economies that have, by design, by infrastructure, by privilege, by inheritance, by law, they tend to capture opportunity and value in the hands of a few, creating the rise of a 1% globally, but often also nationally and locally. There's absolutely no chance of getting into the donuts with such a deeply unequal society and economy. We need economies that are distributive by design, that share value and opportunity and voice and power far more equitably with everybody who co-creates it. And that turns out to be the whole of society. We can compare, for example, the crisis of affordable housing in London, the city where I grew up. Housing sold off to mass landlords, leaving tenants utterly unable to afford their homes. Compare that to another European city, a very elegant, very wealthy European city, Vienna in Austria. But over 60% of people in that city live in what's called social housing. As shown here, it's normal, it's central, it's affordable, it's good quality. It's just the norm of housing. Why? Because over 100 years ago, Vienna decided that housing is not a luxury investment asset. It's a human right. So they decided that the city's housing would be owned and stewarded by the city or city-owned cooperatives to ensure it was used and for the purpose of meeting human rights. And then we can also think about the future of energy, moving away from corporate drilling, whether in the North Sea or in the United States, And we're talking today on the day that the Conference of the Parties of Climate Change finally at least recognize they need to transition away from fossil fuels. Far too late, far too slow, but at least the recognition is now there. Moving, for example, towards community-run microgrids in Kenya. Again, changing who owns the capacity to create energy. From out-of-town retailers where the profits are just sucked out and taken off into tax havens, who knows where, to community wealth building, building that dense web of local economy, anchor institutions, hospitals, universities, city hall, investing in the local economy to create rich local procurement. And then rethinking the design of enterprise itself, the business. Why does business have to be run to be profit-driven? It doesn't. That's just one design that we happen to have inherited, been celebrated so much in the 20th century, but we know in many ways it has been ecologically degrading and socially divisive. Businesses can be run for purpose. And that's a design that we can put at the center. Stewardship. Who owns and governs, and how is it financed? Deep design of business is such an exciting place to redesign for the future. So from degenerative to regenerative, from divisive to distributive, I'm just sharing a few examples from around the world, but I bet you have so many examples in Hawaii of these regenerative and distributive practices already in practice, and the power and the importance of showing those practices, even if they're seeds, because they seed that there is another economy possible and it's rising. So I want to share with you a framework that we've created, because once the donut was published, people from cities, towns, districts, states started saying, well, could we aim to live in that here? Could we aim to meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet here? What would it mean? How would we do that? So at Donut Economics Action Hub, we created a framework. And if we would, let me just invite this question, what would it mean for Hawaii to live in the donut? How would you know if you were? When we want to ask that question, we unroll the donut. Got to create space between the social foundation and that ecological ceiling and ask this little question, which of course isn't a little question at all. It's a very big question. How can Hawaii become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? That's a big, complex question. It should be complex because life is complex, and what it means to thrive is going to be complex. If we ignore anything, it's not going to go away. It's going to just not get handled, and it'll come back and bite us. So we divide this into what we call the four lenses of a city or a regional portrait. And I'm going to run through each of these four, inviting you to imagine in a far richer detail than I could possibly imagine what this could mean in your own place, in your own islands. We've got on the left-hand side national or local aspirations for a place. What would it mean and feel to be here? But also global responsibilities of a place, recognizing it's connected to the whole world. So let's start with the first question. How could everyone in Hawaii thrive? What would it mean for you to say you're thriving in terms of food and water, health and education, energy, community, culture? It's a local conversation that can only be defined by yourselves or by the people of every place. What do we mean by that here? How would we know what is a social foundation that everybody has a claim to meeting? And once we've set that, who is not meeting it? And how can we ensure that we do? So leave no one in the hole of that social foundation. And then how could Hawaii be as generous as her own nature? And here we can ask, what is the generosity of nature in this place? We know that in every unique location on Earth, nature has figured out how to be generous and to create conditions conducive to life. She cleanses the air and houses biodiversity. She stores carbon and cycles the water cycle, harvests the sun's energy, regulates the temperature from the treetops to the forest floor. She builds and protects soil and enhances our well-being. How can we build cities and agriculture and highways and harbors that aim to be as generous as the wildland next door, so that our human settlements actually belong within the natural ecosystems on which they depend and of which they're a part? So these are the local lenses, thriving people in a thriving place. But then we place it in the context of global responsibility. So how could Hawaii, like every place, respect the health of the whole planet, recognizing that when we import food and clothing and cars and computers and building materials and consumer goods, we have a global footprint of carbon, of materials, of chemicals, of energy use, and we create a stream of waste products going out. So we have to take account, and this, of course, this lens is all that red overshoot of the planetary boundaries. How can we come back within our carbon and material footprints? This has never been done before. Countries have never tried to have thriving economies that come back within their footprints before. This definitely needs new ways of thinking and doing and being. And how could Hawaii, like every place, respect the well-being of people worldwide, recognizing the stream of goods coming in? Who stitched our clothes? Who packed our food? Who assembled our phones? And who deals with the waste streams when they go out? Where are the people who are impacted today by the breakdown of the climate because of the ways, the lifestyles that we lead? And what relation do we have to them when they seek refuge? How can a place connect and build solidarity with others through its academic institutions, through sport and culture? How can we connect so that we know that when we will need each other, we are connected? So these are the four lenses: thriving people in a thriving place, respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet. And I just want to finish by sharing with you some examples from places around the world that have used this. And they've looked at it through many different layers. So we call it one portrait with many layers, which makes it really fun for communities to explore this. Some places start with targets and indicators, gathering data and actually creating that metric. Others say, we want to start by recognizing our strengths, our values, our culture, what's already working, what's already in action. We want to see the future now. But let's also recognize the challenges that we know we have here. What are the major challenges we have in each of those four quadrants? What questions can we bring? And the beauty of bringing questions is that anyone can bring questions. You don't have to be an expert to bring questions. In fact, you may bring the wisest questions. What are the history and stories that inform us of how we got here? What is our history that has made us who we are? What is the history of the ancestral circular economy and why it was lost or disregarded and how it's being brought back? What is experience and sense of place if we walk through our cities or through our farmland? What do we learn by being there and by sensing it? And what dreams and possibilities and imagination can we bring to who we can become? And of course, children bring brilliant, brilliant work here. So these we call the many layers that can contribute to creating one portrait. Because in some places, it's been led by the city government. In other places, it's been led by communities, starting at very different layers. So some examples. It was Amsterdam that was the first place to really turn this idea into practice. And in the height of their COVID crisis in April 2020, they launched their city portrait. They did a very Dutch orange version of the donut you can see there. They set a vision. We want to be a thriving, inclusive, regenerative city for all residents while respecting planetary boundaries. And they put the concept of the donut at the heart of their circular strategy to become 100% circular by 2050, recognizing that nobody knows what that would mean yet. That's a moonshot. To be 50% circular by 2030 and to start writing circularity into the city's contracts and procurement from 2022. And they began with social housing, circular projects, circular and fair clothing chain, and connecting farmers to families requiring additional support within the city. It's been aided by a really rich coalition of civic organizations that said, we're already working towards this. Let's come together and create a network. They called it the Amsterdam Donut Coalition, celebrating the pioneers who are already running ahead and asking, how can more pioneers be made possible? They shouldn't be exceptions. What they're doing first should become the new normal. This was followed by other cities in Europe, such as Barcelona, who've created, as you can see, the data metrics of the donut. The photograph in the center is what's called a superblock. So Barcelona is a grid city, and it had masses of car traffic jams going through, and they have removed or really made cars visitors in here. Cars still can drive through, but it has to drive very slowly, weaving its way through the trees. You can see this superblock is a public park. They've put the commons and community and ecology back at the center of this extraordinary grid city. And the superblocks of Barcelona are a real inspiration to many places across Europe that think car dependency is locked in. It's not. They've taken the cars out and brought life and people and community back. And they're using the donut to plan a culture of sustainability. How can we create a culture of sustainability among our residents here? The government of Bhutan got in touch and said, the donut resonates with our concept of gross national happiness. And so they combined the two and said, in designing a new city plan for the capital city, Thimphu, we want to pursue gross national happiness in the donut. So really bringing together the two concepts and making the best of them both, and envisioning the city in 2047, as you can see in these beautiful cartoons. What would it mean for Thimphu to be a place where all of its residents thrive and it stays within planetary boundaries? In Oslo, they brought it down right to the level of one harbour, redeveloping an old industrial site, and they used this framework to imagine and engage the community. What would it mean for this place to be a thriving place here? In Birmingham, very close to where I live, one city away on the train, the community-led work there is beautiful. At the level of a street, they are trying to retrofit the street to insulate the houses, to bring solar and air pump heating, to transform the energy future of that street, and to use these ideas to engage the local community and excite people about the potential. Because retrofitting your house doesn't just mean changing the technology, it means creating and recreating community and so many other ways that you can regenerate within a community. If these ideas are at all interesting to you, we put out a report called Cities and Regions, Let's Get Started, where we at Donut Economics Action Lab just listened and asked, how are local governments and communities getting started? What are the many different ways they're doing this? How can we learn from them how to make getting started on transformation easy? And how can these tools be all the more useful to them? And let me leave you with these questions and these ideas for Hawaii. I'm certain that there are initiatives in your islands that you could place so many initiatives in each one of these quadrants, that everything that's already happening. You can also take one topic like food or transport and place it at the center of all four quadrants, and then ask, how could we reimagine the future of food in Hawaii in a way that enables everyone here to thrive, that enables nature to be as generous as her own nature, that enables us to respect the health of the whole planet and people worldwide. And so we've seen people also using it in that way. If any of this is of value, I would be honored and thrilled. And we would be delighted to work with anyone within the university or in community or in the government to show you how these tools could be of use and to learn so much back from you. But mostly I want to say I find the ancestral circular economy work that's happening in Hawaii a profound inspiration, meeting the world back from deep knowledge and deepening what it means to adopt a circular economy. So that's why I'm honored to be here with you today. If you're interested in the work of Donut Economics Action Lab, you can find it at donuteconomics.org. And I look forward to the conversation. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, mahalo nui, Kate. Thank you so much again for the brilliant, thought-provoking, important work that's really spanning multiple languages across the globe. I want to, when we were in Vienna, we went into the bookstore. We were there for an industrial ecology conference, and I grabbed a copy of your book. I got a picture of it translated into German, so I was so amazed, Kate. It's everywhere. And it's because your ideas are so important for our time. I think in the future of humanity, when we do look back, this is going to be a critical inflection point. This bridging and realization of the extractive nature of our economy, the need to change and shift and provide for the needs of humanity and be regenerative with our aina and the need to bridge with indigenous communities across the world. So. Again, I don't know many people that would do this on their birthday, so just mahalo nui. I'm going to open it up. Actually, before I do, I have one question, Kate. You also do this. Earlier today, we had a conversation around the flow of capital. And if capital continues to go towards extractive industries, old paradigms, we get the same results. At the same time, that system is willing to invest in its failure. But and circular economies is a space of innovation. There's a lot of creativity there, and we talked about the funding, the flow of capital into our, what we call Aloha Aina-based entities. Can you talk a little bit more about how you speak with these issues of innovation for the business community? There's a lot of resistance at times. Here in Hawaii, we battle with old boy politics, entrenched plantation structures. And so maybe if you can evaluate a little bit on that, Kate.
Yes, very happy to speak about that briefly. So many companies, as well as cities, come, or towns and districts say, oh, we would like to engage with the concept of donut economics. So companies come as well. Some really, really big fossil fuel companies, big banks, some small startups, some really innovative companies who are across the spectrum. Oh, this sounds like a concept. We would like to say that we are doing business in the donut. And when they come, we say, it's wonderful to meet you. They might bring their products, here's our smartphone. I want to tell you everything about our smartphone. It's regenerative, it's circular, it's ethical. And we tend to say, it's great to see your products, but we don't want to focus on the design of your products. We really want to focus on the design of your company. And there are 5 design traits that we always look at. It's like being a detective. And when I teach students who are going off into the world of work and business, I say, you need to be a detective about the company or the organization that you're about to join, because you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. These 5 design traits come from a brilliant analyst and thinker called Marjorie Kelly, who's written wonderful books, a new book called Wealth Supremacy, which I can highly recommend. So these traits are so important to me. I have them on a stick, okay? Here they are. And I use these all the time. So think of a company, okay? Think of a company or an organization, a university or an NGO. Think of any organization you know, but I'm going to speak in the language of companies for the moment. Think of a company that makes a product that you know of. We have to look at the design of the company because that will tell us what this company can be and do in the world. So we start at the top and go down, and it gets deeper the further we go down. What is this company's purpose? Why does it even exist in the world? What is it in service of? And do people really believe in that? And do they know it? What are its networks? How is it relating with its own staff? All of its relationships, its staff, its suppliers, its customers, its industry allies, or is it still calling all of them competitors? And does it hold its value and purpose in its relationships, or does it revert to being extractive? How is this company governed? Who's in the room? Who has a seat at the table? Do the workers and employees have a seat at the table? Do future generations have a seat at the table? Does nature have a seat at the table? You could give nature and future generations a seat at the table, a voice in governance. Let's go deeper still. How is this company owned? Who owns it? Is it owned by a family for 300 years? Is it owned by shareholders or venture capital? Is it owned by its own employees? Or is it owned by a founding entrepreneur? Or is it owned by the state? Because all of these ownership designs, they all exist. Is it owned as a steward ownership? Is it owned by a trust? They all exist, and they all profoundly shape how it's financed. Where the finance that enables this company to operate comes from, and therefore what that finance is expecting, what it expects to extract, and what it expects to reinvest in the purpose. And just, we can all think of companies, many that are actually driven by the way they're owned to extract finance, and everything else gets gamed and converted. The purpose gets rubbed off and greenwashed because it's really just here to drive returns for its owners. What we need this century are companies that have a purpose of regenerative and distributive outcomes, a purpose of, in the language I'm using, getting into the donut. that's what we're here to do. We're using business as a vehicle to get there, but our goal is to be part of a regeneration, part of a distribution of flows of value. That's why we exist. And we have made sure that we've designed our networks of relationship, our governance, our ownership, and the finance that comes to us, that they are in service of and aligned with that purpose. Now, as I go down here, I can think of great examples of all of these. To come back to what you were saying, Kalman, it's often the finance. Where is the finance that actually will invest in regenerative futures? Because much finance is inherited from very mainstream capital constructs, and capital is an invention, right? We have to remind ourselves it's an invention. Nature is real. She's there. And we need to learn to understand her and work with it. But capital is a human invention, and it's been invented and can be reinvented. But we need finance that's aligned with the future. And to me, this is one of the great areas of economic redesign, of financial redesign. You know, if there are students who are wanting to get into redesigning enterprise, redesigning finance to be in service, and finding out where are those examples and how can it be amplified, to me, this is critical work. So when you're talking to companies, don't only focus on the design of products, think about the design of the company, because that will determine what it can be and do in the world.
Mahalo. I think we're about time, but I want to take at least a couple questions from our audience. And I see Dr. Komeli Hiva's hand immediately. Yes.
Can we get her to come and teach by Zoom? Semester course instead of Hawaiian studies? This would be really good for our people and our young students.
Yes. So Kate, this is this is one of my mentors, former director of the Center for Hawaiian Studies that I'm the director of now. She's asking me to cut some kind of a deal to get you to lecture via Zoom teach a few classes at the University of Hawaii. I will take this offline with you. That's a fantastic idea. I would love to, not that you want to do it 12 hours apart, but let's work on, I mean, we're going to continue to collaborate, Kate. This has just been fantastic. It's always a pleasure to work with you. So thank you for that idea, Malikala. Yes, question.
Hey, aloha, Kate, and happy birthday. My name's Monica Bells. I'm from the island of Kauai. We're the super small northern island. And I'm the CEO of Kauai Federal Credit Union. So we're a financial cooperative. So that was a very meaningful demonstration you just gave, because cooperatives, we believe, are the way. So we have an economic resilience center on Kauai, and a whole fleet of Kauai friends here with us. We did take a puddle jumper airplane to get here, so sorry, we don't need to analyze that, but we couldn't canoe paddle because of the storm. So we are super inspired by your donut. I'm one of your biggest fans, at least in Hawaii, and our whole team is. And we're also deeply inspired by the indigenous economic model, the Aina Aloha economics. So we've kind of built out our purpose statement of to steward a cooperative economy that honors culture, climate, and community. And we've really taken both of those models to help figure out a measurement system to move forward. As we kind of all are sitting at the table looking around, we're like, okay, so we've got this cool donut, and we've got this cool framework from Aina Aloha economics. What's next? And we're like, well, we're going to need a selfie. And everyone's like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, if you watch Kate, she'll explain it. Like, you do this selfie thing with the donut, and then you kind of know where you are, and then you can kind of dream of where you want to be, and then you figure out how to get there. So we're like, how are we going to do a selfie of the donut? So we found an economist. We're like, well, maybe we need an economist who's place-based and from the island, and she just graduated and came home. And so we're like, can you do a selfie of the donut? And she's like, whoa, I don't have a lot of time, but I would love to do this. And now we're kind of just stuck in this place of like, how are we going to get a selfie of the donut? So my question for you is, that's where we're at on our journey there. What do we do to get a selfie of the donut, and kind of what are some insights on next steps from here?
Can I ask you, when you say to get a selfie, do you mean a selfie of the island?
Yes, Kauai's economy, selfie of the donut.
Okay. Thank you. It's lovely to connect with you and to hear of the credit union and the cooperative. So again, you know, this is the seeds of the economy that we want to see spread. And I love your culture, climate, community. Beautiful. So one example from the city of Leeds in the UK, there was a professor at the university there. He said, I want to have a selfie of our city. How are we going to do this? And he had 4 of his master's students. They each took one of the 4 lenses, and that their master's dissertation was to say, what would it mean to investigate this lens? And that's all documented and all online. So that could be an amazing inspiration as a starting point. You said you took an economist, and with all respect to economists, I don't know that economists are going to be the people to lead this, because actually if you think about what's happening in each of those 4 lenses, they're inviting us to consider, to measure life in her own terms. So they're inviting us to measure the health of our communities through diverse metrics, the health of local ecology through nature's generosities and our performance, the health of the planet through our impact on planetary boundaries and our relationship with others. So actually the metrics and where the focus is placed is actually in a place that certainly as a mainstream economist is where we're not taught to look. And none of it is expressed in dollar terms. It's expressed in life's metrics. So I think you might have in your university community, in an annual cycle, if they're master's students, you say, I would love to ask and to look at, what does it mean? What is the health and well-being of people here? How could we measure the health of the local ecology? How could we find data on our impact on planetary boundaries or our impact on people worldwide? And there are now studies from several places that actually you'd be in a really great place for a student to look at how others have done it and then come up with their methodology to do it uniquely to your culture. And what does it mean to blend it with Aina Aloha economy? I mean, that's the beauty, isn't it? That's when you start to say, thank you very much. Here's some ideas from the donut. And we've got our own beautiful local economic vision. We're going to create a unique mix and share that back to the world and inspire others. So if it sounds of interest, please do be in touch, because I can put you in touch with my colleagues and we can share with you all these resources that are on our platform on donuteconomics.org. They're all there, how other people have done it. One of the reasons we exist as an action lab, and we are Donut Economics Action Lab, and I'm really convinced that 21st century economics is going to be practice first and theorized later. It's the practice where we're all learning from, and that's what's so powerful to me about the conference you're holding now. You're learning from practice. It's not yet in the textbooks. It is not yet codified in the classroom. It's coming from practice. So, and the peer-to-peer inspiration, I mean, when I showed you Amsterdam first. When Amsterdam did this, other European cities just followed. They followed their neighbors. So it's that thrill of seeing people experiment with something in one place. It becomes the beginnings of confidence, permission, and inspiration to others. So I would love to share with you the examples created by students in universities and other places, and then what would that mean to turn that into, for your island, with the Aina Aloha economic worldview, would be a true birthday present. I mean, redoubled. So yes, let's be in touch and let's see what can happen.
Mahalo. Thank you. Okay, we're getting into lunch. We've already shaved 15 minutes off lunch, so I think we're gonna probably have to close it out. Although I have one final question, Kate. How is it possible to have this much clarity at 11 p.m. on your birthday?
Because I get to connect with you. Because it's a real look. I'm a white British woman sitting in Oxford. I mean, I'm coming out of the heart of colonial Western mindset, and that you connect with me and say, I see something of value in what you're doing. I see something that relates to what we are doing. It is so profoundly meaningful to me. Of course, I'm here. And I'm thrilled. And of course, actually, I really wish I was with you, but I definitely couldn't canoe paddle there. But I really, really wish I was there with you. So I'm really excited about the opportunity that this creates. And this work excites me as I think about what you're doing. And, I know that your Aina Aloha economy excites all of you, because we feel like we're creating something, and we're creating not just ideas, but ideas that transform. And we know that this is the work of our time. So you feel like you're on it, you're in it. And we all know that people who are in action are so much healthier of mind and mobilized than people who give up or think it's too hard or too late. This is the time, and we're in action. So that's why I'm wide awake and excited to see what we can follow up from here today. And thank you so much for letting me join this way.
Oh, thank you.